So we have designed we can call an entity class. So a book that will keep track of the title, author, copies, etc. Now, one of the ways that we've got this is this entity class exists. It's physically there. Now, an interesting thing that I wanted to show you is if you go /* enter, it will create what's called it's a Java documentation or comments to explain their method. So I can write here is the constructor for the book class. So here I could say title of the book, person who authored.
Who authored?
Authored is a word.
It's special.
Like class isn't a word, so.
Snake in the room.
Okay, now the interesting thing why you do that, now I realize you don't have to always comment everything, but the reason why I'm showing you the idea of commenting, when it comes to projects, you would comment stuff to show that you have an understanding of what that method was doing. Now, when you go to run, you'll see that you can run your project. You can also do what's called clean and build project. Now, when you clean and build your project, what you're doing is you're also making sure that all the libraries you use, for example, you can use external plugins, etc., 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 is included with your project folder. So when you submit me your project folder and you're using a weird project, weird plugin, I'm able to access that plugin as well. So that's an important thing to just keep be aware of. But now what I was wanting to show you today was under the run, there's something there called generate Java doc. And if I click that, you'll see that it'll take its time, and then it comes up with this. So you'll see that there's a class book, and inside the class book there's a constructor, and the constructor is the constructor of the book class, the title of the book, person who authored the book. It gives the information in there. Do you guys check that? And that is the self-contained class that I've created, book. And the reason why we do this is so we can reuse this class. So if I needed to use this book class again, I could. And this brings me to the next point. If I go to your exam users, you should be mapped a shared folder in your exam accounts. And this has API documentation. And API documentation is the Java documentation of the whole all the Java classes that come defaultly with Java. And inside there, for example, there's a all down the left here is all the classes that is available to you. Now, quite frankly, if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to be able to spend time in an exam and look through every single class and method, etc. But for an example, one of the more common classes you guys will work with is you'll work with something called JOption pane. Now, a JOption pane is basically a way of communicating with the user, and I'm going to show you a bit about that today. And you'll see there that the Java documentation goes, well, that's a bit too zoomed in, will show you that it's got a method name, show confirm dialog, asks you whether you would like to say yes, no, or cancel, and it goes through a whole explanation of the class as well as the methods it uses and the structures it's got, etc. So if you go further down, you'll see there, here are your fields, and one thing you'll notice, when you're creating classes, you're creating fields and you're creating methods. Look here, we've now got a JOption pane that we're using. It's got fields and it's got methods. So we're using those things that somebody else created. We are reusing them. Do you guys get that? So it's quite an important thing to take note of, is that you're able to access this and find out things you want to do. So you have access to this during your exams, and if you're just doing your normal time, you'll see in your guys' shared folder, which is my Z drive, your guys' U drive, you'll see there another folder called API there as well. And API is also available online as well. So if you want to access it from home, you can. It's available online. Just look for Java API and you'll find it. Now the next part I wanted to talk to is when you guys are creating the interface. Now, I used to always create a more text-based interface and you create a main class. But I've started rather teaching you from the get-go to work with a frame or to work with GUI-based elements, just so that we can. I'm finding that my current metrics, so I try to teach logical loop structures, etc., to do interfaces before I taught them how to use GUI, are battling with GUI in their metric projects. So I'm rather starting you guys straight away on GUI projects, and I'll teach you loop structures through other areas. Okay. Now, JFrame form, I'm going to call this GUI. So this will be my GUI elements on there. And what is important that you understand here, and I am recording this, is that at the bottom here, public static void main. When you right click on your projects are indicated on the right hand side here, and you go to properties. You'll see there that there's a whole bunch of different things. Later on I'll talk about libraries, and libraries is the idea of using another person's classes. So I can go, someone created a cool interface that allowed me to email people, or I could plug into Google Calendar, or I could do whatever. You can add those things to your class and then manipulate them and use them the way you want. So it's pretty cool. I mean, you can do really epic stuff with libraries, but I'll discuss a bit about libraries later. But right now, if I go to run, you'll see that it says, what is my default main class? And your main class has to contain public static void main, because that's the first thing that runs. It's like a start point. It's like when I run my program, this is where I will start. Do you guys get that? Now, you have to say which class, because you see I've got two classes in this program. You'll see other programs, okay, these are actually quite small ones. I'll open up, okay, I won't run now. Let me actually pause the video. I think it's worth seeing. This is, so yes, you could have tons and tons and tons of classes, but in this case, we don't have that many, but you have to point which one is our main class. So that's where the program is going to run from. And the one thing that you'll notice, that the first thing it does, it creates what's called a thread. You don't need to know too much about this, but it creates a new instance of itself, so it becomes an object. Remember, a class is like a blueprint. When you go new, you create an instance of it, and you use a constructor. So that calls up here. Init components does all of the GUI elements, that does it automatically for us. This is called the RAD environment, which is a Rapid Application Development Environment. What you'll notice is if I now go under my init components, this is where I can interact. I can do whatever I want. Now, I'm going to literally, on my frame here, I'm going to set up a panel. I'm going to go right-click Set Layout. Now, here we talk about layout designs, and there's quite a lot, and I've created a couple of videos on layouts, and we'll talk about them more. But for now, I'm going to discuss with you purely, I think, 2 layouts I want to discuss with you. 3. The first one I'm going to discuss with you is border layout. And now I'm setting this frame to be a border layout. Now, basically, the way border layout works is it has 5 different areas, and I'm going to open up Excel to try to help me with this explanation quickly. When you have an area like this, basically what you're doing is it gives you a structure that looks as such. So you have a north, this they call the north center, okay, whatever. Then you got, not eats silkworms, west, east, and then you got south. Now, the reason why this is a very important layout and one that is very commonly used is because only the center panel or central area changes size. Because now you guys know you can minimize your windows, you can maximize your windows, etc., right? Certain elements within a program you want to stay the same size. So for example, now if I'm in NetBeans itself, let's just use NetBeans for an example. This window here and this window here, those are the size I want them to be, isn't it? I don't want them to be bigger or smaller. But when I minimize my window, those stay the same size. The only thing that changes size is my central panel. So this design, the border layout, allows you to work with north, west, east, south, center. So it will allow you so that your central area will be the one that will get bigger and smaller. Anything on the north, east, south, or west will stay the size you set it to be. Does that make sense? So that's why your border layout is quite important to use. So in this case, we are going to use what's called a container. Now, a container is not actually a physical element you can interact with. It is just literally an object that can hold other objects. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is I want to be able to hold. So I'm going to do 2 areas. I'm going to put one on the thank you, west, and I'm going to put east, okay, and I'm going to put the other one on the north. So now I've got a panel here and a panel there. So this is where I can put elements in, and we'll talk about what to put there just now. But now, in the central part, I want to put a text area, and a text area is not a container. It's actually physically where I can interact with this object. Now, one thing you'll notice with this, here I'm adding a text area. Now, when I add it to here, and also with the panel, so there should be the navigator should be at the bottom here, you'll see I have there a J text area. Now if I go back to my API documentation that we had open, let me open it up again. You will see that if I now searched for a JText area, bam, there's the class JText area. It is a class. It has methods. It's got ways of interacting. Whoa, freaky, man. Literally, literally everything that you use in your GUI components is actually a class that someone else created. Like you guys are creating a book class, all GUI elements is a class that was created that you can reuse. Does this make sense? So we are just reusing classes. So the same things, like we have setters and getters, like we have constructors, all of that, the exact same thing is used here. Often, though, we can drag and drop it and work with it, but then when you want to work with that, you can use those kind of things. Now, one thing that is quite important is when you have to encode, communicate with something. JText area 1 is not a good naming. So you would right-click, you would change its name to, I normally call it TXT because it's a text box that I want to add, and I'm going to call this text display. Now, do you guys follow? Now, on here, I don't like this, but anyway. So on here now, on the outer panels, I can add items. And I'm going to show you different layouts briefly on here. On this one, I'm going to set a layout to be a grid layout. Now, you'll notice as soon as I set it, whoa, it disappears. Freaking me out. It's not gone. All it's done is it's just, you have set the properties of it to be a grid layout, but yet you haven't stipulated anything else of it. So it's kind of thinking, okay, I'm this small. Because it's got nothing inside it, it thinks, okay, I'm this tiny. So that's why it's become very small. So if we double click on it, it allows us to edit that one specifically. And one of the things that I want to do is on the left hand side here where you've got your navigator, I want to go to my grid layout, and in the properties table here I can say I want 1 column by 3 rows, for example. So now I can add buttons. So if I go find my buttons up here somewhere, button, I can go and I can add 3 buttons. And what you'll notice is because I said 1 column by 3 rows. So if I said, for example, 2 columns by 2 rows, it would then go to that form. So, does that make sense? So you could choose the grid you wanted. But now, obviously, if I just had everything as a grid, everything will be the exact same size, which is why I wanted Borderlayout, because I wanted my text area, which is displaying stuff, to be larger. But you can choose how you want it. I'm going to go back to the 1 column by 3 rows, because I think that's for what I'm wanting to, I'm randomly making up here, it makes more sense. And on the bottom here, I'm going to change the layout, and I'm going to set the layout here to be a flow layout. Again, it will disappear until I add stuff. And then in this one, I'm going to just come up with a label, which is a, well, you know what a label is. Then I'm going to say text field. Then I'm going to say another label. And then I'm going to put text field. And then I'm going to put another label. And then I'm going to put a spinner. Now the spinner is, I've lost my spinner. Spinner. I'm gonna add a spinner. Now, again, you name your thing. So I'm right-click, edit text, and I'm gonna say this will be title of the book. Edit text. Nothing. I want this to be a bit larger than that. If you can't resize something here, you'll see on your here there's an option of columns. So in the properties, you're choosing the properties of that. You could change it by a code. I'm going to say 20. Whoa, 15. Maybe 20 is actually better. Anyway, whatever. Okay, and then the same thing goes for here. I could change this text to be, what was the other one? Author. This will be blank. I'll set the columns of this to be also 20. No, just make it wider. And then I'll make this then as copies. Now your spinner works slightly differently, but as I said, on the right hand side is where you get all your properties of all these elements. Now I'm going to say here, I'm going to change it from a spinner model, and I'm going to change this, so I choose the model, I'm going to change it to be a number. Now when I choose number, I can then go and say I want it to be, here now it talks about data types, and I know we haven't done a lot about data types yet, but we have briefly mentioned them, that data types can store different types of data. A byte is between 0 and 255 maximum value. Double is a massive number, including decimals. Floats also. Integer is whole numbers. Long is a longer whole numbers. This can go up to 32,000 something. This can go up much higher. Short means a small one. But for now, we're going to say integer. You can set maximum and minimum values. You can choose step size. You can choose all that. But here it forces that the user can only enter certain things. And this is important during design a lot of the times. And then what I could do is, now if I go back to my frame, you'll see there that if I expand this a bit, I then can see what my items are running. Do you guys get this? Now I'm going to save this. Now, here I'm going to say book. This is not a functional program because, quite frankly, we don't have much stuff in here to actually make it functional. We haven't learned to raise yet, etc. But we are basically creating a library that can hold 3 books. And any given time, it can only have 3 books. And when you get another book, and it just exchanges that book for the other one.
But can I have like lots of copies of those 3 books, or is it just?
Yeah, you can have as many copies as you want, but only 3 books. So that library, we're a library who stocks 3 books. Okay.
Yes.
And the reason why is we haven't learned arrays or structures yet to hold more. But you guys saw that ways that we could work with it. Now, I'm going to save this. Well, hello. What did I just do? I created a tree. I don't want a tree. Go away, tree. But
So this.
GUI is nice and easy because you can add it from the palette here. But realize one thing. Any one of you complains about the way that the interface of dragging and dropping the GUI elements in is tricky. I'm going to force you to code your GUI from then on out. And the reason why is technically what's happening while you're dragging and dropping, it is coding stuff for you. So now you can also refer to this. If you want to, in your code, change a GUI element or you want to manipulate it, you can just look at what it does and when it generates it and then work with it. So if you click plus on the generated code, what we've done so far is this. So that's everything we've done so far. Now, it's not that much at the moment, but you'll see as soon as you create a more complex design, the generated code becomes insanely length. So you'll see, like, here's a little bit more of a complicated example of GUI design. This is this GUI design, right? So this is a decent GUI design. I've used different elements within inside there. I've got buttons, I've got whatever. Now you'll check there, if I look at the generated code for this one,
So how long does this take to manage?
no, this didn't take long to design the GUI, no. Anyway, but you have to know where you're going and you name things, but it does take a little bit of time. Now, so you guys can, so don't complain about the way that it snaps things in, etc. It is still, it does help. It's massively helpful. Coding it is sometimes nicer because you can be more directly in control of what's happening, but it's not as quick. Hence the reason why rapid application development environment, RAD. All right. Now, I've lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Okay, so now in this case, we've got our book class. Now we've got 3 books, don't we? We want to work with 3 books, so we're going to say book, which means that we're working with our book class. Do you guys get this?
Do we have 3 books or like 3 types of books?
3 books. Well, 3 types of books. 3 book.
Because we could have 140.
Yes. Okay. So we got book B1. B1 short for now. Naming convention wise, you'll see classes. Guys, this is very important. Classes are named with capital letters. Fields or variables are named with small letters. So just by looking at it, you can identify what type it is. If it's an object or whether it's a class. Do you guys get that? So objects are always with small case, or methods or things like that. Classes are always with capital letters. So book, I could even call it book 1. That's a bad. Book 1, comma, book 2, comma, book 3. Now what this means is I've got book 1, book 2, and book 3, and the data type, or what type of object class it is a book. It's a book object. We haven't, no, this is declaring. Remember, this is when we declare the fields. Do you guys get that? Now in my constructor, I should initialize my fields. Now at the moment, we don't have any details of the book. I'm going to, for example, just for argument's sake, I am going to create book 1 is equal to new book, and I'm going to use not my default constructor but my fully parameterized constructor. So I'm going to say wizards first rule by tr good kind, and number of copies we have 135. I like that number. Now book 2 is equal to new book. And now what we can also do is we can use the default constructor. What does the default constructor? It gives it default values. But all fields have to be initialized. If I try to right now, let's just, before I do this, I'm actually going to show you why you do this, why you have to initialize something. If I now go private display all, txt display.set text, so I have to say that it's void, my bad. I'm creating stuff without telling you what I'm doing. Okay, private void. Private means nobody outside this class can access it. Void means this method just does something. If you guys take a look at my book class, you'll see there, public string get title will return a string. Anything that is void doesn't return anything, it just does something. So my display, what I want to do is I want to say book 1 dot fail dot toString. Because remember your toString, I'm actually going to show you something. I'm just going to say book 1 plus \n \n. What does \n? What is that? It's what's called a Newline Character. It means that it's like an enter. Because your enter key is actually a character, and in this case it's a \n, and Java represents a Newline Character. Now, I'm going to add on there book 2. I'm going to do the same thing, \n, and I want to say book 3. Now, defaultly, when you just refer to an object, defaultly it will refer to the toString class of the object, which in this case is this, title, author, copies. That's what the toString is. If you just say the name of the thing and you're expecting text, it will automatically just refer to the toString of that object and return that. Now, I'm going to run, as soon as my program runs, I'm going to run display all. Now, when I run this, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to throw an error. Why? I haven't initialized my book, so my constructor purpose is to initialize all fields inside my book. So if I run it, funny enough, it actually didn't throw an error, but it did just put there null null. And I think with newer versions of Java, it just ignores it. So it's kind of okay. But then you'll check, here's my interface, it's running, it's got the wizard's first rule, but TR good kind, 135 copies, null null. Does that make sense? But what you should do is you should actually you should sit there and you should go and initialize my other 2 books as well, even if it is just with default constructors. And in your guys' exams, if you do not initialize your all fields, you will be deducted marks. So in other words, your default constructor, if in your book class in your default constructor you do not initialize all fields, marks will be deducted. It is imperative that fields get an initial value. Now if I run this, you'll now see it'll say, oh hello. Whoa. Okay, but you get the idea. And you'll notice as well that no matter how big or small I get, which is the only panel that grows or shrinks? Sorry, let me just my wife. Hi, is it urgent? Okay, I'll call you. I'll call you back here. Okay, cool. Bye. Alright.
So you didn't even say love you. This is
I'm in trouble. She didn't say I love you either.
You're supposed
2 ways.
So you're supposed to initialize it as the man.
Since we're new age, come on. No. What we got here is you'll see here it says, it's quite funny, it now just says nobody by nobody, copy 0, but initialize there. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to now go, ooh, I just record their conversation on the video.
Yeah, it's still recording now.
Oops. You know,
No, so don't edit it out.
now, what we got here is I want to be able to go, if I say title and author, I want to be able to then go book 1, and then that would become books 1 title, if I said also the number of copies. So now, I'm going to stop this video now, and then it's going to be part 1 of GUI, and then there'll be a part 2 of GUI. Otherwise, what's happening, this one video is going to be like 40 minutes long. I'd rather have 2 25-minute videos, so you can choose which one you want to look
You
at.
just want more money because of the views.